Here we go. To the Moon Digital Marketing for Coaches. That is me. Okay, so for anyone watching the live stream already, what we're doing is we're doing some technological internet things, and we're going to get this link over to Derrick's audience as well, so we can increase, maybe even hit double digits in that number of watches. So here we go. Copy link coming to you in the Zoom chat, mate.
Looking forward to it. Excellent. Got it.
Hopefully that does the trick.
Going there now. And well, I've got you up there. Now, interesting. Is there going to be a feedback loop?
I guess if we I've got my Facebook closed now, so I guess if you just minimize it or mute it, I'm not sure. I've had people do this before, and we've never struggled with it. Can you hear it on your end?
Share now. Share to your profile. Don't know. I'm new to this, so I'm going to just minimize all that. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, that's fine. I'll tag yours later. But let's get into it.
Yeah, we're going to have a bunch of this content coming through to you in a couple of days' time. Anyway, don't you worry. Plenty of ways to promote the material. But that's it. Are you sitting comfortably, Mr. McManus?
I am very comfortable, Alex.
Sensational. I'm feeling pretty comfortable as well. Cool, man.
Love that word, sensational.
Well, let's rock. Let's rock. Welcome back to the Coaches to the Moon podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I'm very, very honored and blessed to be sitting here with Mr. Derrick McManus. He's been a speaker and a trainer for the past 20 years. He developed the human durability model, which I'm really excited to learn about. And he's helping individuals and organizations become just more resilient, more durable, with an incredible story behind him, all the way from Adelaide. Derrick, thank you so much for being here.
Alex, absolutely sensational. I'm quite looking forward to it. The small chat that we've already had prior to going live is just fascinating. So I'm looking forward to where this all goes.
Well, if you found that small talk fascinating, mate, I can't imagine where we'll go from here. This is huge news. There's obviously one story you've told a lot, and I want to get into that story soon. But I'd just be curious to know, as a speaker and as a trainer, who does a lot of stuff live, how have you navigated the last couple of years of more remote work and lockdown orders and not being able to speak on stage?
I'm in a very fortunate position that I haven't had to chase work. So I've been a police officer for 42 years, and I'm now retired because I'm old, and I am very comfortable with that. But I don't need to chase work or money or anything else. I'm quite comfortable. So it's the live streaming, the online isn't something I've chased, but it's something that's come to me naturally. And when I've needed to, I've done live events, live virtual events. Does that even make sense? But virtual events into Southeast Asia and into Hawaii and places like that. Very, very comfortable with it. I like it. I really quite enjoy it. I can do this massive event and then close it down and go and make a cup of tea, rather than doing the socializing and all those things, which I love as well. The thing that I do miss out on is part of this. I'm a retired person. I like to relax and have holidays. So part of the attraction to being in this industry for me is the ability to travel. I had a 90-minute breakfast event in San Jose, California. It took me 8 days to do that, because along with 90 minutes on stage, I had to do the basketball, I had to go surfing, I had to, drive, all those bits and pieces. So I love that. Love that side of it.
My one of my business coaches is a speaker called Travis Bell, the bucket list guy.
Oh yeah, Trav. Yep.
You know Trav? Yeah.
Yeah, I know Trav.
He says that professional speaking is the hardest way to make easy money.
Yeah, absolutely.
and it sounds like it. It sounds like having to, flog yourself over to California and deal with time zones and jet lag and all that stuff for a 90-minute talk that you get paid for is an interesting way to live. It sounds fun.
Absolutely, absolutely. I was very fortunate, and I know we're going off on a tangent. I was very fortunate that I had another trip to California where I did a tour of several cities over there. But my daughter was in Europe at the time, and she was just on her way home. And on this phone call, we've said, "Why don't we just meet in LA, have lunch, and then come on tour with me?" And so she did. So her and her boyfriend, connected with me, and we spent 2 weeks traveling California together. Just one of those things that people go, "Oh, let's meet in LA for lunch." Weird, bizarre, but it happened. So yeah, hardest way to make easy money.
That is rock and roll. We've got my wife's brother and his family live in San Francisco, and we were coming home from Colorado to Sydney, and we went via San Francisco airport for some reason, and they met us for a cocktail in the lounge. And then we went home. So yeah, absolute rock and roll. I love that kind of thing, man. Well done. Well, it's really great to hear that business has been consistent, but you're not out there chasing it, and you weren't impacted too much by having to stick around at home a bit. The internet's a crazy thing, eh?
It's a wonderful thing, isn't it? We are so connected across the world.
Yeah, it's funny that we both jumped on this call and we were both a little surprised we're in a similar time zone.
Yeah, right. I, again, off on a tangent, I relate to people that as I was growing up, I was born in Scotland, came out here when I was about 3. And by the time I got to 7, mum and dad are making phone calls back to Scotland. But, they needed to make a phone call to the operator. The operator connected them to the other operator. The operator connected them to the people on the other end. And then mum and dad are yelling down the phone for 3 minutes because it's so expensive.
Yeah.
And yet when my daughter was in Europe, we're on FaceTime, and she's taken me for a live tour of her favourite coffee shop. And this is where I like to get gifts. And the world has changed, and in absolutely amazing ways due to the internet.
Yeah, it's absolute rock and roll, man. And I want to actually talk about the past just a little bit, because you got a lot of stuff's happened in your past. I want to take us back to 1994, which I was the ripe old age of 3 back in 1994. And I'd love to, just to give our listeners some context about what we're going to talk about in the rest of the podcast. If you could take us back to, I believe it was May 1994, 3rd of May 1994.
3rd of May 1994.
The moment that changed your life. If you could just take us through that moment that changed your life in as much or as little detail as you like, that'd be great.
Okay, so if I go into as much detail as I like, we're going to be here for 3 days.
Sweet.
So I'm going to make it succinct. But 3rd of May, 1994, 2:15 in the afternoon. I was a member of STAR Group, which is the Special Task and Rescue. I had specialist skills of sniper, diver, underwater recovery diver. I've been trained by the SAS in counter-terrorism. My section, STAR Group, Special Task and Rescue, high-risk arrest, hostage siege, counter-terrorism, VIP security to the Queen when the Queen came out. There's all that high-end stuff. On this particular day, we went out to arrest an offender who was described as high risk because he'd made threats to shoot people in the past, never done anything, so we couldn't just storm his house, but we had to give him an opportunity to make a mistake. We went out to arrest him. He clearly didn't want to be arrested. He started shooting. He was using a Chinese military rifle, semi-automatic. He fired 18 times in less than 5 seconds, hit me 14 times. And I had some massive injuries, just a couple of the major injuries. My left forearm was hit with a single bullet. And in actual fact, get that in the right place. Yep. I don't know if you can see the scar there.
It's not the right shape anymore, is it? Yeah.
No, that's right. It's live. It's a lot more visual, but a single bullet went through there, broke the bone in 2 places, severed the artery. Another bullet severed an artery in my right wrist. 2 bullets in my stomach. I lost 45 centimeters of bowel. 2 bullets in my left thigh. I lost 30% of the muscle in my left thigh. Missed the femoral artery by the width of a piece of paper. Another bullet went through my right Achilles tendon, took out 80% of the thickness of my Achilles for about an inch and a half. And then there were other bits and pieces. But they were the major injuries. And then I was lying on the ground for 3 hours with those injuries, just bleeding profusely. And a lot of people say, hang on, you're lying on the ground for 3 hours with a severed artery. That doesn't make any sense. To anybody with medical knowledge, it's just not logical. But for whatever reason, both ends of the artery just closed off naturally. I didn't do anything to them. Doctors say they don't know why the body occasionally does this. But if they hadn't closed off, I would have bled out, in that space of time. I was lying on the ground for 3 hours, constantly bleeding, constantly monitoring my body, and fully functioning, fully awake, and acting proactively for that 3 hours, except for the last 15 minutes. The last 15 minutes, I was passing in and out of consciousness because I just lost so much blood. But going into that, and this is what I can go into the depth of detail for that, as much as you like. And to be quite honest, there are some really hilarious moments within that shooting. And people go, how can you got shot 14 times? How can you laugh at this? But there are some hilarious moments, and we might get to them a bit later on. But I prepared myself physically, mentally, and emotionally for what I could realistically expect to encounter in my day-to-day life. And this is what I like to talk to people about. How do you prepare for the choices you make, the consequences you might encounter, and the life after that as well? Because that's what I did. I said that I'd made a choice to go into Star Group. I knew the possible actions that I was going to take, and some of them were sensational. Jumping in and out of the helicopters, going diving to great depths, being able to meet the Queen and all the bits and pieces. There's some exciting stuff, but it comes with danger as well, okay? And the possible consequences, the good consequences, going to have a sensational time. Life is going to be wonderful, full of adrenaline, something I love. Possible consequences, I may be shot and injured, I may be shot and killed. And I said, if I get shot and I don't die, what will life look like after that? And how will I want to handle it? And that level of planning gave me the ability to go to this event where we were going to arrest this guy. He shoots me, and I respond proactively in exactly the way I would want to. But it's the preparation beforehand. Once I had been shot, I said there were 4 things that I needed to do. Now, these are not 4 things that I created in the moment of being shot and going, oh, gosh, what do I do now? It's that pre-planning, taking responsibility for my choices, my actions, and the consequences and the future afterwards. If I do get shot, how would I like to respond? 4 things that I knew I needed to do. And this applies to everybody whenever we get overwhelmed, either in business or in life. The first one is to control panic. Don't let panic take control of the situation. And the best way to control panic is to have some idea of what you're going to deal with, some idea of how you're going to deal with it. It's as simple as that. The greater the risk, the greater the planning, but just some idea gives you the ability to move forward. The second thing that I needed to do was control shock. Now, shock is the body's response to any trauma, whether it's physical trauma, whether it's psychological, whether it's emotional trauma. Any trauma, the body goes into fight and flight mode. Oh my gosh, what's happening here? How do I respond to this? And the body responds to trauma or to change, whether it's positive or negative. The first response you have is, oh my gosh, and we freeze. I needed to understand that that's exactly what my body was going to do. But to get out of freeze, having some idea of what I'm going to deal with, some idea of how I want to respond to it, gives me the ability to take that proactive action immediately. And so when I got shot, I knew that I needed to control the shock in my body. One of the things that happens when we go into fight and flight is the brain closes down. Parts of the brain close down. And those parts are responsible for creativity, planning, problem solving, and we go into automatic mode. I needed to know that I needed to do whatever I could to get the blood back to that area of the brain so that we could function at a higher level. Sorry, just got something happening there. So I needed to control panic, control shock. Then I needed to slow down my heart rate because I knew that in panic mode, my heart is just going to be absolutely pumping. So I proactively had to do that. And I used a lot of the skills that I learned by being a commercial diver, and that's commercial trained for the police. And the last one was I needed to slow down my breathing. Now, I knew those four things way back in 1994, almost 28, just over 28 years ago, 28 years and 7 days to be exact. Or 9 days actually. But that slowing down my breathing was something I knew back then, 28 years ago. And in business today, we're only just starting to talk about this breathing system. You know, the four different types of breathing in for 4 seconds, the 4 seconds of hold, so many different ways of doing your breathing. But breathing is one of the most important things we can do, and it's an immediate response that we can proactively do. It just calms the whole body down, gives you a moment to think. And as soon as you take a moment to think, you break the tension that you're in, and your mind opens up to other possibilities or opportunities. I didn't realize it was going to be so powerful for me. I just knew I needed to do it. But that's the background. That's where I was in the moment. Coming out of that, the first doctor to get to me said he didn't know whether I was dead or alive when he first got to me. He described it that I took this last gasping breath and there was a flicker of my eyelid. And then he and his team worked their magic. 2.5 years of physical rehabilitation. And after 2.5 years of really intensive rehabilitation, I went back to Star Group, back to fully operational, back to operating as a sniper, diver, and encounter terrorism duties. The thing that amazes most people, though, is that just 3 months after the shooting, I had a meeting with the psychiatrist, first meeting, and all I wanted to do was pick his brain about what might I encounter in the future. People have been through these sorts of things. They have nightmares, they have flashbacks, they have PTSD, all those sorts of things. What can I anticipate and how can I plan it? How can I deal with it? And this goes back to some idea of what I'm going to deal with, some idea of how I'm going to deal with it. And we had a meeting, it was about 3 hours. And at the end of that 3 hours, just 3 months after the shooting, he said, Derrick, psychologically, you can go back to work tomorrow and you never need to come back and see me again. People thought that I'd been in therapy for decades, on death's door, massive injuries, massive amount of rehab in front of me, extremely stressful, but I never needed to go back and see him again because my psyche was in such a good, strong position. And this is where the philosophy for human durability has come from. We don't need to wait for something to happen and then work out how we're going to bounce back. If we've got some idea of what we're going to deal with, some idea of how we're going to deal with it, then we can work out how we can sustain optimal performance within that environment.
Well, Derrick McManus, I can say you're one of the most impressive men I've ever met. And I've met the guy who plays Toadfish in Neighbours. So that's a biggie, you know? No, honestly, man, thank you for giving us not just a great story, but for a very polished breakdown of how you got through it as well. Control panic, control shock, slow down your heart rate and slow down your breathing. There's a lot of things I'd love to unpack, which is why I wasn't expecting to get to the rest of my questions today. Okay. I want to unpack things in that story.
Yeah.
What's the most, one thing I want to get to, what was the most hilarious moment of a 40-hour siege when you got shot 14 times?
Okay. So there are so many moments that are just hilarious within this, but the one that shocks most people is that when we went to the house, we knew there was a potential of him shooting us. We had an entry point that we were going to go to, but part of our planning is take a look for alternatives. I went down to have a look at an alternative entry point, which was a glass sliding door. And as I got to within about 2 feet of that sliding door, all of a sudden I just started falling to the ground. And as I'm falling to the ground, I'm going, what on earth is going on here? Why am I falling? I hadn't felt any impact, hadn't felt any pain, hadn't heard the sound of gunfire. All I knew was I was suddenly falling, and I started cursing myself. And you can imagine, big grown man cursing myself. The words weren't pretty, but I was abusing myself. How could I be so stupid? As I was halfway to the ground, I looked at that glass sliding door again. There were small round holes that hadn't been there before. And then I heard the sound of gunfire. Still hadn't felt any impact, Still hadn't felt any pain, but I've rationalised small round holes, gunfire, me falling unexplained. I must be getting shot. And if I'm getting shot, the conversation I had with myself at that time was, Derrick, don't be too hard on yourself, because if you're getting shot, it's quite acceptable to fall over. But then I fell to the ground. I'm lying on my back and my feet are pointing directly at where the bullets are coming from and my head's facing away. And as I'm lying on my back, he's still shooting me. 2 bullets hit my left thigh. And when these 2 bullets hit me, time slowed down. Like these 2 bullets, 5 in the space of time like that. But they seemed to take about 30 seconds. I felt the first one hit me, and it was just like a sledgehammer driving into my thigh. Shockwave went up through my body. Shockwave slowly came back down in this seeming 30-second period. Second bullet hit. And again, it's that sledgehammer, shockwave up, shockwave back down, seemingly 30 seconds, to be abusing myself again. How can I possibly lie here for this long? So I knew I needed to fire back. But before I fired back, I realized that I'm lying on my back. And when you're lying on your back, which way do your feet point? Up in the air. I knew I just needed to get up above my feet. But I've got weaponry, I've got equipment, I've got flak vest. As I've lifted my upper body up, my feet have come up to counterbalance. And the thought that ran through my head was, I better not shoot myself in the foot, because the guys at work will give me shit for the rest of my life. And that's literally the thought that ran through my mind at that time. And I don't embellish that at all. That's exactly what happened. But that was being prepared, having some idea of what I was going to deal with, being well trained to be able to manage that event, but some idea of how I was going to respond to it as well. And we do this naturally. Everybody does this naturally. We just don't give ourselves credit for it. If you think about the first time you drove a car, how overwhelming was that? Sitting behind the steering wheel. Oh my God. When you drive a car now, what do? You're thinking about your podcast, you're checking out the people walking past down the road, you're thinking about dinner. But if something happens in front of you, bang, you're right there, exactly where you need to be. Mm-hmm. And so when we're prepared for what we can realistically expect to encounter, we can respond to it in ways that we want to respond. But when we deny that we're making a choice that's going to throw us into a dangerous situation, then our response is never going to be exactly what we want. Sometimes we do better than we would have anticipated, but the better we prepare, oh gosh, don't you hate it? I put my phone on silent and it's still making noises.
You're all good, man. You're all good. We're honored to have you here.
But the better we prepare for what we can realistically expect to encounter in our lives, the more chance we have of getting an outcome by design. And that is basically what I try to talk to people about. How do we better prepare for what we can realistically expect to encounter? What choices are you making? What actions are you taking? What circumstances are you deliberately putting yourself in? Whether you know you're deliberately doing it or whether you're doing it by default, but we make choices all the time. More often than not, we're responsible for the things that are happening around us. And I like to have people address that and then prepare for that.
I think that's absolutely spot on. And I know that we're mostly here to talk about a business context, but it's funny that I am finding myself, since I had my daughters a couple of years ago, I've got twin little daughters.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I've really found myself, thinking along these lines, what would I do in this situation? If someone, was being rude or violent towards my family, or if someone came into the house, it's on me. What would I do? And it's funny that this has come at this time, because I literally had a book delivered outside right now, which is about, crisis management preparation stuff. I saw the Amazon guy drop it off. So what a bit of serendipity today on the podcast. Wow. So a lot of people in the coaching and leadership space, they do get into it because they've been through some sort of trauma or some sort of, I suppose, a
major life event.
Yeah, exactly. That they've managed to overcome some sort of adversity in their life, and that's why they get into the coaching and leadership space. Do you think you would have been able to create the career and the programs that you have had you just gone to a different job that day?
No, I wouldn't. I actually described that I got dragged into this industry kicking and screaming. I was focused on my career. Even after the shooting, when I went back to work, all I wanted to do was be a policeman. and just, continue on in that career and end up being commissioner of police or whatever it might have been. I got dragged into this world kicking and screaming because people wanted to hear my story. At first, I refused to tell it because I thought they wanted a hero story. Wasn't interested in telling that. But I used a stack of blood, lost almost all the blood in my body, used a stack of blood, and the blood service said, would I like to say thank you to blood donors? And once I started talking and saying thank you to blood donors, I found out there were more messages and systems and processes that I could talk to people about. And that brought me into this industry.
Great. And you really don't come across at all as a guy who wants to tell a hero story, which is awesome. You are very self-deprecating in the way you tell it, which
Thank you so much.
It's the Australian way as well, isn't it?
Well, yeah, kind of. Yeah, absolutely. And don't get me wrong, I love telling stories. And you get me onto the shooting and I can tell you all sorts of stories, but I don't want to do it from, on stage as the hero. But there are some hilarious, even more hilarious things that, happen within that shooting.
Well, I'm going to have to come to one of your events or something because I'd love to hear more of it. But let's talk about your work now, because the area of work you're focusing on the most is human durability, helping people be more durable, more resilient. You've got the 3 pillars of human durability. What are the 3 pillars of human durability?
3 pillars of human durability is that it sits on a continuum and starts out with fragility. Whenever we start something brand new, and this is, talking about your 2 daughters, when they were born, my God, how overwhelming would that have been? You may have had some preparation, but there were things that you were just going to experience. You go, my God, Mum, Dad, what do I do here? Yep. So we kind of knew we're learning, we're inexperienced, and we're looking to experiment and find out how to do these things. We don't want to stay in that fragile state. Okay, we want to move to the next stage, which is resilience. Right, where we're able to go, okay, I've hit a problem, but let me problem solve this. Yes, I know how to sort this. I can bounce back from it. I can work this out and we can have good results from it. And so that's the second pillar, fragility, resilience. The third pillar is durability. And that's how do we sustain optimal performance? And now that you've had 2 years, daughters, is that right?
About that, yeah.
Okay, you're more comfortable. You know that when they have this pain or they make this noise or they start having this conversation, you know where that conversation's going before it even finishes, and you're able to anticipate how you're going to respond to it. And you've already got that problem solved before it actually happens. Same with your podcasting. We're episode number 64 or thereabouts. When you first started podcasting, you would have had some education in it, some exposure to it, but running your own couple of podcasts, the first couple, is like, oh my gosh, how's this going? By the time you get to 10, 15, 20, you're going, excellent, no worries. If that happens again, I know how to fix it. Now you're at 64. I'm not even sure if you prepare coming into these because you know exactly what you're doing and how you're doing it. And I know you do your research, but that's all part of ensuring that if something happens, you're able to sustain optimal performance within the podcast. So this philosophy works for personal as well as business, as anything in life. The easiest way to move from that first pillar of fragility all the way through to durability is moving from fragile to resilient. The easiest way is to get some coaching, guidance, mentoring, and be allowed to gain experience. Now, this allowed to gain experience is really, really important, because if you've got someone who's managing you that doesn't coach you, doesn't mentor you, doesn't give you any teaching, and does not allow you to make mistakes, then you're going to stay fragile, or even worse, you're going to go scared. Okay. But if you get that good coaching, guidance, mentoring, you'll move from fragile to resilient very, very quickly. And this is why we have parents. This is why we have mentors at work and in life. The easiest way to move from resilient to durable is to build up confidence, courage, self-belief, and belief in the systems that work for us. Now, these are systems that we have internally, the way that we do things, but it's also the systems of operating at work. What are the policies, procedures, practices? What's the politics in the office? Understanding those systems gives you the ability to say, I know this is going to happen, and if it does happen, I've got to solve before it even actually becomes a major problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's totally true. For some context on me, I was in the hospitality space for about 10 years before I got into the online space. And so I left school and I went through my chef apprenticeship. I'm a qualified chef. I was kind of head chef at one place and sous chef at some fancier places. And I went through all this stuff. And I've had some nightmare services in my time, some big ones, some little ones. And on Saturday this week, I'm actually going and catering a wedding with an old friend of mine, old business partner of mine.
Wow.
And for someone to think, okay, two people are going to go and cook for a wedding, that sounds like a massively terrifying thing, I'd imagine, for a lot of people. But for both of us, we're like, okay, sweet. We'll start tomorrow. We'll start preparing tomorrow and it'll be fine because we've got that level of confidence and systems and we know it's going to be rock and roll. A lot of people in business, I'm getting there in my business now, but a lot of people listening to this are at the beginning of their business where one client says they want to drop out and it feels like you've been shot in the leg, or you've got someone says that you owe them money, but you don't have the money because you're waiting on someone else to pay you money. That kind of circular invoicing thing that we all get into in small business, that sort of thing just doesn't phase you so much anymore. So for the people who are early on in their business, I know you've gone through it, but just a little deeper, why is the adversity in the early days of business so important in moving from fragility into durability?
So one of the things that I like to do is normalize a conversation in people's heads, because when we get into business, we like to go, I started in this business. I know I'm going to be successful. I'm going to be the best. I won't make mistakes because people will judge me badly. And so we don't allow ourselves to do that learning phase, that experimentation phase. We want ourselves to be the best. And if we make a mistake, we are so hard on ourselves. We punish ourselves. We stay up late at night. Oh my gosh, how will people judge me for making that mistake? If you're running a team, say the two of you are going to go out and do the cooking for this wedding, and you bring someone else in just to give you a hand with a little bit. Now, they don't know how you two operate. They may not have a lot of experience, but if they come in, you'll take them under your wing. You'll go, oh, don't worry about it. I'll show you what you need to do. I'll teach you. Or I know you're going to make some mistakes, but that's fine because we'll sort all that out. But that person's going, my God, I can't make a mistake. Can't let these guys down. So we're gentle on other people, but we're hard on ourselves. The more we understand that everybody goes through this fragile stage, everybody goes through the learning process, everybody makes mistakes, everybody stuffs things up, breaks things, the more we're able to go, oh, well, I'm just normal. I'm the same as everybody else. And we are gentler on ourselves then, and that allows us to grow faster. But the more we try to hide things, the more we try to be protective, the less we are open about what we need to learn, the longer it's going to take to learn it. Because if you're not willing to put your hand in there and say, excuse me, I'm really not sure how I do this, then you are going to make more mistakes because you're going to experiment and you go, oh, I hope I don't stuff it up. I have stuffed it up. Now I've got to try and hide it. So the more we understand what the process is and that it's a normal process, the more comfortable we are going, hey, boss, I've stuffed up. I've just broken this. Can you help me to fix it? Because I don't want to do this again. And your boss will have more respect for you because I go, this person wants to grow. You've got to have the right boss for that. And 99% of bosses are probably good for this, all your managers. But there are those 1% of managers who are micromanagers and won't allow you to make mistakes. But you've got to understand that as well. And if you get into an environment where you've got a micromanager, you've either got to manage your mindset around that micromanager, or you make a decision, this is not for me, I'm out of here, and go and find a place where you enjoy working. And there's not enough people that are prepared to go, I am not enjoying this, I'm going to move. They generally say, I'm not enjoying this, I must be the fault, I must be the problem. They're judging me harshly, I've got to perform higher. No, generally we perform well, but we've just hit someone who's not a great manager, not a great coach. And that may not be your fault. It may be that they're insecure. And so there's a whole lot of philosophy behind that. But normalizing that conversation, understanding that process of growth allows us to grow faster. I explained the process to some RAAF fighter pilots. Now, these guys are the best of the best. These guys don't make mistakes. They can't. They are flying $30 million aircraft and they can't make mistakes. But one of the things that happens is when we become the best of the best, and then we take on a challenge which is just a little bit higher, a little bit bigger, we will slide back from being the best of the best who doesn't make mistakes to an environment where we've got some new things to learn. It's a new challenge. We've got new things to learn. So we'll slide back a little bit towards resilient, where we are now learning new things. But sometimes the best of the best won't allow themselves to make those mistakes because we're perfect. We can't be seen as anything but perfect. So when I was talking to these fighter pilots and explaining this process, one of them, threw his hand in the air and said, "Hey, just hang on a second. Does this happen to everybody?" And I've gone, yeah. I've discussed this with psychiatrists, psychologists. Absolutely normal. Everybody goes through this process. And he sat back and he went, "Oh, thank goodness for that. I thought it was just me." And that's how harsh we judge ourselves, right? We don't allow ourselves to make mistakes. But the more we're able to say, "I'm taking on a new challenge. Give me some coaching. Give me some guidance. What am I going to learn?" The faster we are going to process back to that place where we are the best of the best. And this happens in a sporting analogy. You'll start in D grade, you become the best in D grade, you'll go to C grade. You're not the best anymore, but with good coaching guidance, building your confidence, you'll move to the best in C grade, then you'll move to B grade, you're not the best anymore. It goes on and on. Yeah. So throughout life, whether it's life, children, business, whatever it might be, the process is the same. And the more we understand it, the faster we're able to move through it.
Absolute rock and roll advice, man. So relatable. It's so relatable. Like when you said, it happens to everyone. The bit about, going from confident in one area, starting a new area, and then having to go through it all again. Like the amount of times where I've been thinking in my sort of 7 or 8 years of online business, like, should I just go back and full-time start another cafe or something like that? Because I know how to do that. Almost did so many times. But now I wouldn't, because I've come through in the relatively resilient phase now, which is really, really exciting. It's like going from year 6 and being the big kid in primary school to going to year 7 and being the smallest kid in a big school, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a scary one. Or my wife is a early learning teacher, and she teaches kids who go from being a 5-year-old in a kindergarten to suddenly being in year 1, and they're suddenly the smallest kids. And she has to prepare them so much for that transition to not being, the big dog anymore. So,
and the same principle applies to anybody who gets promoted within work. They go from being an absolutely brilliant operator where they are to the boss coming along and going, "I'm going to promote you," or you apply for a new position. You're great. You've now got into a new position. And even though you're well qualified for it, there's new politics, there's new processes, there's new interactions between people. And you just slide back a little bit on that learning phase and that problem solving phase. And you go back to that little bit of resilient. And again, the more we understand that that's a natural process, and everybody around you, actually nuancing just the thoughts in my mind before they come out of my word, but before they come out of my mouth. The people around you generally understand it and they will support it. But there are people there who will be fragile themselves, and they're the people who try to undermine you. What, you've got this new promotion and you can't do the job perfectly? We're always going to get those people. And the more we can anticipate there'll be a few of those, but a lot of supporters, the better we're able to manage those as well. So that process happens for everybody. You go up, there's new things to learn.
Yeah, more money, more problems.
The self-doubt.
Yeah, man. Yeah, a new level, a new devil. At every level there's
Great
a devil.
Term.
Yeah, I don't know who said that to me. This is the beauty of podcasting. I'm picking up these like little nuggets of advice, and you said you wouldn't have any nuggets of wisdom. I believe we've had a whole schnitzel of wisdom today. This has been a really, really great conversation, Mr. McManus, and I'm very, very happy to have had you on. I can't let you go. I think I've just noticed, is there an Olympic torch behind you? What is that?
Yeah. That which way do I move? Yeah.
How did you come across an Olympic torch?
Well, I got to run with it. 2000, obviously the Olympics were here, and they had their torch running around. They asked for community participants to be able to run with it, and I wanted to. And this is an activity of proactivity. I wanted to run with it, and they said you can nominate yourself, or you can be nominated by people. And so I nominated myself, but then I wrote out a list of reasons why I should be nominated. And, overcoming injury was one of them. But I was also on the Parents and Friends at school. I ran gymnastics clubs. I volunteered there, here, everywhere. And so I wrote this list, and I went around to significant people in my life and said, hey, listen, I'd love to run with the Olympic torch. Love it if you could support me. Here's a list of reasons you might like to put on that recommendation. And I gave that to many, many people, and I was fortunate enough to be able to run with it.
Well
but
done,
it's something
man.
I wanted to do, so I did whatever I needed to do to make it happen.
That in itself as well, right there. What a beautiful, beautiful lesson to finish up on. Derrick, I could talk to you all day. I'm sure you don't have time to do that, but I'm super, super honored to have had you on the podcast today, man. Thank you for your story, for your knowledge, for your wisdom. And yeah, we're going to be directing people as much as possible towards everywhere to find more about you. Do you have a book or anything that we can buy? Or
I'm in the process of writing a book.
Great.
And I know that there are actually 3 books that I need to write. So the first one is about to be finished, and that I'll certainly let you know when it is.
Please let us know. I'd be really thrilled to read it, man. That sounds really exciting. So yeah, thank you so much, Mr. McManus, for being on the podcast today once more.
Alex, absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Legend. So for anyone listening live or on the recording, thank you so much. I'll be back in a few days' time with another episode of Coaches to the Moon. Until then, thank you.